The horror returns, and no, this is not Lance. All of a sudden, turning into a Mexican. This is me, Pedro Nunez, and I do have them here with me. Both of my co-hosts, Lance and Philip. Brian is here as well. And tonight we have a very, very special once-a-year event, March Madness, here in the Horror Returns. Of course, this has been a tradition going back now about 5 years, I think. So joining us tonight is our annual panel of celebrity guests. So we want to thank everyone for joining. And Lance, why don't you introduce us to our guest here tonight?
Yeah, you got it, man. Pedro, we appreciate you stepping up, dude. I was considering retiring. I'm getting very old, so I
Okay.
may have to retire, and you may have to take over. So this is a
Getting
good
old,
acid
Lance.
test. So all right, so here's who we got, folks. Tonight we've got first up from Percolated Media. You should know that name very well. That was our podcast spotlight last week. Currently doing the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. In order, guys, or just randomly?
In order.
There you go. Okay. So Percolated Media, we've got a double dose of talent. First, we've got Mr. 4 on 10 himself, Garrett Collins. And you all know and love Garrett Collins. Used to work with Nate Peterson on a few odds, bits and bobs. Am I right, Garrett?
Oh yeah, we worked with Nate years ago, and then we went to Binge, and I took him with me there, and now me and Matt are starting our own thing, and yeah, we're in the midst of Pirates now, and we just recorded the Superman 3 podcast for the Superman retrospective, and that is going to be something to behold. That's a great podcast. So we're doing good things.
All right. Did you have to edit out any mustaches when filming the Superman podcast?
Just uploaded it. Haven't started editing it yet, but just
right.
recording it. Just a lot of laughing, a lot of fun, and it's been fun doing our thing over there. And we'll talk at the end what we're getting ready to launch here pretty soon too.
Nice.
So there's something else going on as well.
I always get a kick out of promoter GC. It always puts a smile on my face. So let's keep it going.
Well, we're glad you're joined by Matthew Goudreau. Matthew, you're not new to this game, are you?
No, I'm a sucker for punishment, so that's why I'm back once again. I think this is my third or fourth time, so I appreciate the invite as always.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Well, we're
Matthew,
glad-
which ones were you with us for? Well, you were with us for best kill or best grindhouse film ever made? Which one were you with us for?
So I was on for Grindhouse, I was on for Best Final Girl, and this makes my third appearance. So
Awesome.
Third time is a charm.
All right.
Well, you were was last year Grindhouse? I guess that was, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, everything kind of
I was
blends
on for that as well.
We saw Don lose his shit about 30 times because he felt they didn't qualify, which I'm looking forward to again this year, by the way.
All right, and then we're also honored to be joined by a couple from the Super Network. We've got Bede Jermyn. You guys know him very well, but Marcus Wilturner joins us as well. You'll know Marcus as the good writer.
Yeah.
Over at over at Super Network. Would we get any arguments from you guys on that?
Definitely
No,
no
he's,
argument for me. Definitely
the
no argument for me.
And, you know, I would never say that, but I do enjoy the compliment. So
All right. Well, Marcus, what are you guys up to over there, man? Anything new coming out?
Ooh. Well, we just at least at I guess the Super Net, at least in terms of podcasts and stuff. We just recorded our latest episode of the To Be Tuesdays podcast, so that should be dropping tomorrow. And in terms of reviews, I know you got a few things you're working on at the moment, Marcus, but other than that, that's kind of sort of really a few things we've got coming up at the Super Network at the moment.
Yeah.
Always got a lot going on over there. And no show would be complete without a Godfather, right? Wouldn't you guys agree? Every gang as large as ours needs a Godfather. So of course we've got Don Anelli. Don, I don't even want to guess what all you're involved in now. You got like 17 podcasts going at any time. What are you pimping these days, man?
Yeah, well, it's great to be back once again, and hopefully I will shoot myself off a little bit less than last year, but I've still got some reservations left in the tank. But
Uh-oh.
but yeah, so I've got a bunch of stuff going on. I mean, we'll discuss that at the very end with the rest of everyone else, but yeah, I've got my irons in a few different fires, so to speak.
All right. Well, dude, you do a lot for the community, man. Every week, well, actually 2 or 3 times every week, you
That's every
know,
weekday, Lance.
yeah, every freaking weekday. Holy shit! Yeah, you post what everybody's up to out in the horror podcast community. So believe me, it's greatly appreciated, dude. A lot of
Yeah,
people notice it.
yeah, no problem,
So
man. Always happy to help out.
yep, they call you the Don for a reason. You know.
Hmm.
It's a literal table of contents every single week, which I appreciate.
Right. Well, we had to have some street cred. We can't just have a bunch of, podcasters that, masturbate over movies every week here. So let's have an actual filmmaker step up. It's filmmaker Gabriel Theiss. What's going on, Gabriel? Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on. Wow, this was a big honor to be invited back on. I had such a good time last time, and now I'm here for a tournament. So I'm going to be pretty ruthless. I'm going to be pretty cutthroat this time around. So be ready, guys.
All right.
We don't
Yes,
expect anything less. We're ready.
yeah, but I am also a podcaster as well, and my show, Not That Bad, just did an episode on the infamous Dan Aykroyd movie, Nothing But Trouble, which my co-host is a big fan of, and you can hear my thoughts on that if you're curious about that film. But we're doing a big Patreon special. We're defending the entire Leprechaun franchise for anybody
Ooh,
that
nice.
Some of those are
Yes.
real
wants to
good.
check that out for March
Nice,
Madness.
yes, Leprechaun Back to the Hood.
Yes.
Classic, right?
Particular.
No, seriously,
Not
that's
just
my,
Leprechaun in the Hood, Leprechaun Back to the Hood. Those are that's
no,
like
Back to the Hood is my all-time favorite in the franchise. I love that movie.
Oh,
it's one of the
wow.
best duologies in horror history.
That's cool. Yeah, apparently Don agrees that a friend with weed is a friend indeed. So
That's from part one. That's
all
from
right,
part
so
one.
let's see, who else do we have here? Oh yeah, how could I forget? A guy that's been with us from the very start. It's the inimitable Jack Falvey the Fourth. What's going on, movie freak?
How you doing, huh? Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting.
What's up at Binge, man?
Right now, rounding out some Last of Us commentaries. I think we got the last couple episodes of those coming up in the next few weeks. And then we sort of revamped Movie Homework. That's now on its own feed. And we've covered Whiplash, Big Trouble in Little China, Get Carter, and this week we're doing Lost Highway. So we're kind of all over the map. Haven't really settled on a theme yet, just kind of doing some different stuff,
All right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything, literally.
That's the
And
idea.
last but certainly not least, you know him, you love him, you hear him every week. He's our resident movie expert because everybody knows Phil and I know absolutely fucking nothing when it comes to these movies. I mean, I do know that Dane DeHaan is a great actor and Pet Sematary remake is, beyond reproach. But other than that, I don't know a whole lot. But Brian Stitcher, you know him and love him. He's your expert, and he joins the cast tonight. How's it going, Brian?
It's going good. You started talking about the expert. I didn't know who you were talking about for a second, but try not to disappoint anybody this time. Apologies to Don if I choose the wrong movie again from last year.
Well,
Oh, no worries. I'll probably forgive you.
Thank you.
all right, Pedro, get us going, man.
Okay, so here's how it works. So we start out with 33 films.
Oh,
Greatest-
Garrett, let the man speak. Jeez.
Jesus.
Come on.
Unbelievable.
I got some mad flashbacks right there. I'm sorry. So yeah, we're starting with 33 films for quote unquote greatest elevated horror film of all time. These were picked by our guest here and randomly distributed into a field of 32. Plus a, I guess you would say, a playing game. I guess I don't know. That's Lance's yearly fuck up right there, where there's one odd film just hanging out there.
At least he didn't fuck up like normal and he put 2 films on there twice.
I tried, but you stopped me both times. You helped me. Thanks, Don.
So as the tournament goes on, we will work our way towards until we end up with a final battle and a single champion. And I think it's 8 voters we have this year, right? And I will be kind of like the tiebreaker. They'll each give their best argument in each round as to why the chosen film in each battle deserves to move forward. And at the end, we will have our champion. It's that simple. So, Phil, get us started.
All right. So we'll start it out with the first little set of brackets here. Actually, our 2 that are hanging off the edge. With Suspiria from 1977, original, and Suspiria 2018.
Which is the better of the 2, by the way? Oh, I don't get a vote, do I?
You don't get a vote, man.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Don, let the fun begin, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the original for this one. I appreciate the remake. I think it's got some attributes that are far more worthwhile than a lot of people give it credit for. But on the whole, I still prefer the original to this one. The original is one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. It's hard for me to top that one, so I'm going the original.
All righty. Let's go with Bede.
Well, that I guess this is a kind of a hard pick because I think both films are great, but I am partial more to the original Suspiria. But I think in terms of which of the 2 classifies more under the elevated horror banner, I may have to go with the 2018 remake because I think that's kind of more it fits more of the term of elevated horror than the original does.
Okay.
Okay, look at that. We got a
good
vote.
start.
Gabe, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think the remake is perfectly respectable. It hasn't dethroned or even rivaled the original anyway in sort of that pop culture like impact sort of way. I mean, Suspiria, the original, is still one of the most iconic looking horror films. It has one of the most iconic soundtracks. And I just don't think you can say that the remake accomplished as much. So I'm going to go with the original.
Okay. Makes sense. Jack.
I'm going with the remake here. We're talking elevated horror. This is not a giallo bracket. This is not a 70s horror bracket. This is an elevated horror bracket. So
Yeah.
only one of those movies is elevated horror. It's the remake.
Okay. Good argument. Marcus.
Yeah, I'll have to go with the remake as well. To kind of restate what Jack was saying. The original is a classic. It's pretty much well known, as most of these films are, but it's I would always consider that to be more of an artistic horror film, whereas kind of what you see is what you get. But if we're talking, deep-rooted, elevated horror, then yeah, I definitely got to go with the remake. It's extremely psychological. It's also a bit artistic as well, but just not full-fledged. It's a deep film, so I got to go with that one.
All right, nice. Garrett.
Before I give my answer, is anyone else on this call offended by the term elevated horror?
Yes.
Or is it just me?
I want
Yes.
a definition. I want
All
a
right.
definition.
Everybody's got
of
to
the
give us some bullshit.
very pretentious term, elevated
Very
horror.
pretentious.
Yeah.
Very pretentious and insulting.
pretentious.
What? Garrett Collins, what is, in your opinion, elevated horror? Tell us.
Elevated horror to me is a term made up by people who don't want to admit they like horror films.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. They used to be
okay.
called
Good
they used to be
way.
called psychological thrillers
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah.
Or supernatural thrillers.
So
Yes.
I'm going to
Something
take
thrillers.
Yeah, I'm going to take
Gabe.
elevated out of
Oh,
this
go
equation, and I'm just going to go with my favorite horror films of this set. And Suspiria, I think the original really outdoes the remake. The remake is good on its own, and as far as the themes that it sets up and things, it's different in its own way. But I'm going to go with the original, just because it really made it was something different at a time when horror really needed it. So
Okay.
All
the
right.
original.
Are we tied up right now? We got 3 original.
Uh-oh.
All right, cool.
This could be fun.
Matt, what do you think?
I'm the opposite of Garrett, which is shocking to a lot of people. I'm going with the remake. I think the remake does what I champion all remakes should do, which is take existing source material and put a new put a new stamp on it. And I am not an Argento fan outside of Deep Red. I find a lot of his stuff, particularly with his utilization of dream logic, to ironically put me to sleep. And there's not a lot for me to grasp onto. And I would rather listen to the sounds of traffic than another Goblin soundtrack in my life. So I'm going with the Suspiria.
Come on. You know
might
what?
actually have a fight. This
I
isn't a
recently
tournament in name only. We might have a fight.
I know.
I recently was able to watch Goblin perform live with Suspiria in the background, which was pretty cool to see. So yeah, that was
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Now, the Suspiria remake does have the Tom York soundtrack, so I did want to throw that in there. It's now,
Yes.
obviously, the Suspiria remake has a lot going for it. So, no diss on the Suspiria remake.
Brian, do we need a tiebreaker?
We might, because I'm gonna have to disagree with Matthew, man. Give me Goblin all day. Original.
Oh man.
Yeah, bringing up the soundtrack on the remake is actually a point against it instead of a point for it.
All right, so that puts it at a tie.
I think Pedro's
Pedro?
already got to jump
Oh
in.
shit! Here we go. Okay, so
Go ahead and start making some enemies now, Pedro.
here's the thing. Suspiria looks beautiful, right? It's an experience when you're watching Suspiria 77. There's no doubt about it. Certainly, Goblin helps a lot. Suspiria from 2018 has more story to it, right? It's deeper than it really has any right to be, honestly, with the story they were working with. So I'm gonna go as far as like what we're trying to figure out here. I'm gonna go with Suspiria 2018. Although I love Suspiria 77, but Suspiria 2018 is what we're talking about here today, and that's the one that's gonna take it for me.
I didn't think it had a chance, but that was going to
Yeah.
be my vote too. So
That was a
I'll take it.
close one. That was a close one.
All right.
All right, Suspiria 2018 wins that one. So
First
we'll-
bracket, first disappointment.
So
But you're used to disappointment. It's okay.
we're gonna run that
Working
one
10 years.
and roll it right into Suspiria 2018 versus Saint Maud. Let's go with Jack.
Shit. I like both these movies. Saint Maud's a really strong performance, and it has a hell of a final shot. I love the ending of that movie. I don't know. Suspiria feels like more of a complete meal to me, though. I think I'm probably going to vote Suspiria, but I did really, really like Saint Maud. I thought that was a solid movie. But yeah, I think I've had more time with Suspiria remake, so maybe that's all it is. But I'm going with the remake.
Okay. Marcus.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me too. On one hand, I do love Suspiria for everything it was, well, for everything you guys were talking about. But I did like Saint Maud a lot too, because the imagery and so many of those like torturous, kind of almost maddening moments. Yeah, that was pretty intriguing too, honestly. I'll probably just have to stick with Suspiria because yeah, I believe I've seen that one. Yeah, I've seen that one more times, and I've talked about that one more times. And again, even though I do like Saint Maud, I think it's much more of a short story kind of film. I don't know. Suspiria just had more of an impact, so I'm going with that one.
Sure. Okay, 2 for Suspiria. Matt.
I think I'm going to make it 3 in a row. Saint Maud was one of those movies that I thought would have been a great extended episode of Black Mirror or something along those lines, more of an anthology piece, because I felt like it kind of strained to get to that runtime. Whereas Suspiria, for a movie that's almost 3 hours, to captivate my attention fully, I have to commend it considerably for that.
All right. Brian.
I'm gonna have to go with Saint Maud based off the lead actress's performance and the build up to that final scene. I thought it was incredible. So Saint Maud gets my vote.
All right.
Don Anelli.
Yeah, I'm backing Brian on this. I'm going Saint Maud. It's not against the remake. I do like it, and it's got its own points. But I think if it's something I forgot to do in the original assessment, which was which one is better elevated horror. I think Saint Maud is its religious allegory. The performance speaks for itself, and I mean that final shot is better than anything that the remake of Suspiria did. So yeah, I'm going Saint Maud on this one.
Come from behind. Gabe, what do you think?
Comparing the two films, a good character study and a good, more confined kind of A24 horror movie is great, but I really love the epic scope of the Suspiria remake. It does not feel its runtime, and I think that's because it's tackling so many themes and it's loaded with so much symbolism. And I don't know, I think it's a really juicy movie. And I am a fan of Tom York, and I'm a fan of his soundtrack.
Yes.
There you go.
So there. All right. Bede, what do you think?
This is a pretty easy one for me. I'm going with the Suspiria remake, mainly because I wasn't a fan at all of Saint Maud.
Oh.
Because Suspiria was far more interesting and far more complex film, while something like Saint Maud felt very, once you find out, like once you get to that end shot, it pretty much tells you exactly what type of film it is, and it just makes it less interesting because of that, especially if you you just don't want to revisit it. So yeah, the lead performance is great, but I think Suspiria has a lot more going for it compared to Saint Maud. So that's the one I'm going with for this one.
All right. Garrett, your vote doesn't count, but what is it anyway?
Story of my life. You know what? Somebody said that they don't feel the length of the Suspiria remake. I certainly felt the length of that movie. It was too long. Saint Maud's short. It was one of the most underrated movies of that year. I really enjoyed Saint Maud, and so I'm definitely going Saint Maud on this one.
Oh man!
Of course, he called my opinion out. What else is new?
No, I that wasn't you. I don't think.
No, that was
Did
me.
you say that? Oh, was that you? Okay. Once again, Matt's lost in the shuffle.
Well, standing next to you, it's pretty easy for that to happen if you've ever seen him in person.
Okay, next bracket is going to be Psycho versus Pan's Labyrinth.
Ooh.
Wow.
Those could not be two more different movies. All right. Let's start with Brian.
I'm gonna have to go Psycho because Pan's Labyrinth is not horror; it's dark fantasy.
Yeah, here we go.
Wow, here we go.
Got the buzzer.
Arguments. Here we come. Speaking of which, Don.
Ding, ding, ding! Not horror, Psycho.
Yep. Okay.
Not horror, Psycho.
Psycho. All right.
All right.
And I should point out, Pan's Labyrinth is better, but not horror. It's off the list.
Here we go. Here we go.
That makes sense.
Going by the book.
Yep, going by the book. Pan's Labyrinth, a better movie, but it's not a horror film, so Psycho.
Marcus.
Yeah, I gotta go with Psycho too. I mean, as much as Pan's Labyrinth is a huge, grand, fantasy, it does have a few spooky and creepy and scary moments, but it's not fully horror at all. Psycho, on the other hand, well, it's Psycho. It's a classic. It pretty much made us all lock our doors when we take showers. So yeah, I'm going with Psycho.
Yeah, it's got Vince Vaughn in it and everything. Let's go with Psycho.
And Anne Hesh.
I'm glad we're not doing a Psycho v Psycho bracket.
We almost did.
Garrett.
Yeah, I'll go with Psycho as well. Pan's Labyrinth, beautifully made film. Definitely has some terrifying moments. But Psycho's more of the horror element that I enjoy. And it started such a whole movement that I think we're still feeling today. So I'll go Psycho.
Okay. Gabe.
Yeah, I love Pan's Labyrinth. I can see why it's being talked about in this horror sort of debate. It definitely has credentials as a horror movie, or at least a monster movie. But if you take Psycho out of cinematic history, everything changes for the genre. That's how important that movie is.
Well, there's
and
still
it has
Peeping
one of my well, Peeping Tom kind of walks so Psycho could run, I think. But
Yes.
also Psycho has one of my favorite performances in a horror movie ever in Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, and that character speaks for himself. So I do have to go with Psycho.
All right, makes sense. Jack.
Yeah. So I just want to ask a question. So Psycho is elevated horror? I guess what is elevated horror? We didn't really talk about that at the beginning of this.
It's not
That's
elevated
right.
horror, but it's more horror than Pan's Labyrinth. That's my justification.
For sure. And I think I'm with you there, so that's probably where the vote's going. But I'm just kind of curious, like,
Yeah.
Psycho's like horror. Psycho's just horror. Like it is like foundational horror. I don't think
I'm
there's
looking
anything
to get it. I'm looking
elevated
for it to
about
get
it.
bounced out pretty easily. So if
But
that,
it's
Yeah.
more austere than your typical slasher movie compared to the slasher movies that came after. It's more restrained. It's more cerebral. It misleads the audience and tricks it. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a case to be made that it's some progenitor of the elevated horror movement, which is the most amorphous and vague movement to me. But
Yeah.
that's the discussion we're having.
True.
Yeah. Well,
But it is
just
pretty
had to say
straightforward.
that,
There's not
so.
a whole lot of metaphorical stuff in Psycho, although maybe there is.
Yeah.
Think about it. Really
Well, I think
Well-
slasher, there's a lot going on in slasher films too.
Right. Well, in any case, I don't want to hold it up. I'm going Psycho for the same
All right.
reasons stated. I love both movies, but only one of them's a horror movie.
Okay. Matt.
I have to echo, I think, everyone's sentiment. Psycho, by definition, is more of a horror movie than Pan's Labyrinth is. And it's just funny, 60 plus years later, that the idea of Alfred Hitchcock doing a quote unquote slasher movie, that's like having John Williams score a trauma film. So I have to go with Psycho.
Clean
Bede.
sweep? Oh, okay.
Well, I think Pan's Labyrinth I can classify as horror, but it mixes dark fantasy, horror, war and stuff like that. But I think Psycho pretty much is a full-fledged horror film. And also, like everyone's already stated before, it pretty much changed the landscape of cinema as we know it. And it's directed by one of the greatest directors of all time. So hence I'm giving that my vote for this one.
First clean
Okay.
sweep, right?
Clean sweep. Psycho wins. Although I think Psycho is an easy win on that, even if we throw the semantics out. All right, let's do The Shining versus Annihilation.
Oh, we know what Stephen King would vote for, and it's not The Shining. We know that.
That's right.
Well, not Kubrick's The Shining.
We'll start with Garrett on this one.
Is Annihilation a horror film?
So
You know what? Let's not
that fucking bear
let-
thing is terrifying.
let's not blame Lance for this, because we go through this shit every year because he never defines the criteria for this fucking tournaments, and we have this conversation every year, no matter the theme or the subject. So with that said, just go with your heart, Garrett, and give
Go
us a
with your
vote here.
heart. It
If I
definitely
went
got
with my heart,
read
go with
all three of the
Annihilation,
books.
but Annihilation's not a horror film, so I got to go with The Shining. I'm fucking
Oh,
stuck voting for that
there we go.
fucking movie. So Shining it is.
Shining. Okay. Marcus.
Yeah, I guess I'll probably have I'll go with Annihilation.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah, I've watched The Shining so many freaking times, and it's a good movie. It's a great ghost story. It's a great all the elements are great. It's just Annihilation just works a hell of a lot better for me. Just my own personal opinion. It's definitely one of those types of sci-fi horror films that really kind of speaks on a lot of different levels as far as like visuals and elements and stuff like that. And Garland is a magnificent director and definitely one of my favorites. And Kubrick's a master too, but I gotta go Annihilation. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
That's tough. Garland versus Kubrick. That's a tough one.
Let's make it a fight. Matt.
I have to go with The Shining for a similar reason that I picked Psycho, in that Kubrick, a master taking the haunted house subgenre, and also by extension a book that is, I think, good, but is not one of King's best, and making it just this stylistic fever dream and so much stuff. And Annihilation, I'm not a fan of it whatsoever. So I guess anything against Annihilation, I would pick the opponent. So I have to go with The Shining on every level.
Yikes.
Them are fighting words right there.
Did you hear that, Marcus?
Not for me, because I don't have a horse in this race, but for whomever picked this film.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm
Don,
married. I fight every day. It's okay.
Don.
Oh, yeah, I gotta go with Annihilation here.
All right. You got it.
Yeah, just Shining can fuck off. I don't care for that movie.
Jeez.
Yeah, Annihilation's not really much of a horror film either, but I like it more, and I think it's got enough qualities with the bear that it can count. I think the finale kind of takes it out, but there's enough there that I can justify it for myself. And yeah, fuck The Shining. So I'm going Annihilation.
Let's go, Jack.
The Shining is one of my favorite movies. It's definitely like a top 50. It gets rewatched 1 to 2 times every year. It's just a staple in this house. But I don't think it's elevated horror, and I think Annihilation is the definition of this amorphous fucking genre. So Garrett, you said that it's not a horror movie. You're right. A lot of elevated horror isn't. I don't even know exactly what it is, but it's kind of the whole I know it when I see it thing. And Annihilation feels exactly what pretentious douchebags think horror is. And to me, that is exactly, like, it's the definition of elevated horror to me. So I vote Annihilation for this, even though I'm a huge fan of The Shining. Way bigger fan of The Shining than I am of Annihilation.
Jack, it's kind of like that uncanny Jack Valley, if you will.
Guilty. So
I feel like that pretentious douchebag quote should be at the title card for every A24 production.
Yeah.
Which I think A24 is, which I think Annihilation actually is.
I love it. You made me change the answer I wrote down. All right, Gabe. What do you think?
Yeah, okay. I mean, no disrespect to Alex Garland. I actually really loved Men. Of course, that's the film we're talking about, but it did more for me than Annihilation, funny enough. But The Shining, even if we're talking about it through the elevated horror lens, I think there's a lot to say about how enigmatic it is, how it sort of refuses to give answers, and how Kubrick wants to keep you in that fever dream state. But it also is one of the funniest horror movies I've ever seen. And Jack Nicholson is basically starring in he's acting in a comedy where everybody else is acting in this like very cerebral ghost story. And I think that makes for one of the most entertaining horror movies ever made. So The Shining.
I've never thought about it like that. I like it. All right, Bede.
Yeah, this is another easy one. I think Annihilation is a great film. It's probably the only Alex Garland film that I actually do care for. But I'm going with The Shining because of a lot of reasons. A, it's directed by Stanley Kubrick. B, it is definitely, if this film came out today, it would definitely be classified under the elevated horror banner. And also C, like a lot of horror filmmakers who have done their own version of an elevated horror film would always bring this up as in comparison to an influence. So that's the reason I'm going for this film. And also it's one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, The Shining for me.
All right, we got 4 for The Shining and 3 for Annihilation. Brian, what is your final answer?
As much as I love The Shining, I've seen that about 100 times. I've seen it more than Annihilation. I will continue to see it more than Annihilation after this. But Annihilation falls in the category. It's not horror. It's elevated sci-fi horror. And I think it fits. Because I'm sure in elevated horror, you can make up all these little subgenres that go in there. And I think it fits a lot better than The Shining. So Annihilation.
Annihilation is your
Wow.
answer. Okay. Pedro, I guess you do have a dog in this fight.
First of all, I'm enjoying Brian's mental gymnastics to make sense of his vote there. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna for everything that was said before me, I'm gonna say The Shining. The Shining, I do feel like it's elevated horror, even at its time when it came out. I think there's so much underneath the surface there, and there's been documentaries and books written about this fucking movie, for crying out loud. So there's a lot of subtext there, and so I'm gonna go with The Shining.
All right.
Okay. All right. Last one on this side of the bracket. We got Let the Right One In versus Get Out. Which Let the Right One In?
That's the original, right? That's the original.
The
right?
original. The original.
Let Me In is the
Okay.
remake. Let the Right One In is the original.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They had to say
They're only like a year apart anyway.
I think that was called Let Me In, right?
Okay.
They should have just called the remake "Open the Door."
Open the fucking door.
Gabe, let's start with you.
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I love both those movies. However, I consider Get Out to be the sort of kind of blueprint for elevated horror. So if we're really talking about what is the most definitive or what is the kind of the champion of that genre, I think it is to the elevated horror genre that Halloween is to slasher movies. So I got to go with Get Out. Even though it kind of breaks my heart because Let the Right One In was one of the first horror movies that I really loved.
Yeah, they're both great movies. That's a tough one. It's a real tough one.
It is. Marcus. Oh, must have lost Marcus for a second. All right, we'll
His
go.
mic's muted.
Oh, you there, Marcus?
He might have stepped away for a second. All right, let's
No,
go.
no, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
All right,
here.
all right, I'm sorry. All right, Get Out versus Let the Right One
Sorry.
In.
Yeah, I gotta go with Get Out. I mean, as much as I liked Let the Right One In, Get Out is significantly more, I guess you can say, just relatable, and also just it's a fine picture with great performances, and it really just honestly speaks. I don't want to say to a generation, but in a way, it speaks to a lot of people on a different level than most horror films do, or at least ones of this caliber. So, yeah, I loved Let the Right One In for its imagery and stuff like that, but Get Out is just it's a better film to me. So, yeah, I'm going with that one.
All right. Jack.
I don't know that I could say anything that the people before me haven't said. I think it's Get Out. I think it's Get Out with a bullet. It is elevated horror. It's got to be on the Mount Rushmore of that, whatever that phrase means. But yeah, Get Out.
Bede.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think both movies are fantastic. But I'm definitely, if I have to go, because my picks, it's either going to be ones that are my favorite or ones that I feel like have done more to the horror genre. So I'm going to go with Get Out because when that came out, it kind of just changed the landscape of horror in terms of how it explored its themes. And this also, it's also just a great film all around. It's brilliantly well written, brilliant performances, and it's got a great dark humor. It's scary, and it just handles its story extremely well. And one that could easily have just played rather simply, but I think Jordan Peele just adds so much to it that kind of just made it even greater than, its premise. It could have easily been a straightforward kind of film, but I think Jordan Peele just added so much to it that definitely, quote unquote, elevates it. And yeah, I think it's just a great film. So yeah, so I'm going with Get Out on this one.
And then before it came out, it was, hey, that guy from Key and Peele is making a horror movie.
Yeah, we were all questioning him.
Did anyone hear the term elevated horror before Get Out came out?
No, and
No.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say Ari Aster is the one who actually came up, said that term elevated horror in public.
Yeah, I think I was gonna bring that up in the next round,
makes
or in the
sense.
next matchup, because I think that's really where it really became the standard of these kind of films, whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah, that's true. That makes sense. we'll get to that for sure. Matt.
So my definition of elevated horror, which I think changes for everyone on this show, is I weight it a bit on, does the film have a certain cross genre appeal to people who wouldn't necessarily watch horror movies? And I think in that case, I lean towards Get Out, not just because I prefer it, but I think it captured a lot of people who don't normally go to see horror movies. And the scariest thing was that a horror movie of that ilk was nominated for Best Picture. You know, that's elevation through awards for a genre that has historically been looked down upon and jettisoned, with some exceptions. So for all that, I have to go Get Out.
All right. Garrett.
Oh boy, this is an interesting bracket because there's so many moving parts to both these films. But you know what? I'm not a big Get Out fan, believe it or not. Let the White Run In, however, really, really hit me. That is a movie. I mean, a vampire is a protector. And it's just the way she protects that kid in that movie, all the way to the final, just grisly but awesome scene, captivated me. And that is the type of horror I really like. And Get Out's, it's fine. I didn't think it was as great as everyone said it was, though. So I'm going with Let the Right One In.
Okay. It at least gets one vote. Brian, does it get two?
If it would have went up against anything else, I would have picked it for everything Garrett has said about it. But I loved what Get Out had to say. I loved the performances, and still to this day, I think it's Jordan Peele's best movie. It's not Noblance. It's
I'll disagree.
nowhere.
I'll disagree.
Well, you're wrong.
Okay.
And if you Google elevated horror right now, I'm guaranteed this movie will be one of the first ones to pop up. So Get Out is my vote.
Right. Okay. And Don and Ellie.
Yeah, film I like more versus the film that's the poster child for the discussion we're having tonight. Yeah, I mean, Get Out is great at what it is, and I mean, there's nothing I can say about it that hasn't already been said, but I have to pick it, even though I still love Let the Right One In. Under, like Brian said, under most normal situations, I would vote for that one because there's a lot more going on underneath the surface than what people think. I mean, you look at the backstory with Oscar, and you realize how he came into being. You realize what the kid is going to go through because he's on the same damn path. He's going to end up in that exact same situation 30, 40, 50 years from now, and that's exactly what's going to happen to him. And there's a lot more going on underneath the surface than what people think, but it's Get Out is the poster child for what we're doing here tonight. So I can't vote against it, especially this early on in the bracket.
Fair enough. Yeah.
All right.
You know, one thing I wanted to say really quick is I was thinking about it right now as we're talking about Let the Right One In and how foreign films, they kind of have an inherent advantage in this tournament just because they have different motivations, right? I mean, American films have a formula, and that's what's kind of been followed because that makes money. And so American filmmakers tend to think of the bottom line more so than foreign filmmakers who a lot of times get sponsored by their countries. You know, they have different artistic sensibilities. So us getting used to consuming that American product, when we see a foreign film, it's something different. And so we're going to automatically elevate it, quote unquote. And so I think, yeah, just something to think about, you know, as we're trying
to skin
to
off my ass. 90% of my favorite films are foreign anyway. Fuck America.
as the theme of this entire tournament, thanks to Lance's fuck ups, is that we're going to try to define this fucking term as we go along. That's one of the things to consider as well. So,
Right.
anyways, let's keep on going.
Lance, you're responsible for all of this.
Oh, is it my fault?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't pick any of these movies. You guys did. So.
All right, you want to take over the
Yeah,
second half of the
all right.
bracket here?
Let's move on. Okay, so we got our first of four brackets done. Let's move on. So we've got potentially a big one here. It's Hereditary versus Green Room. And we will start with Marcus on this one.
Well, I I'm going with Hereditary. I liked Green Room. I thought it was a very visceral, like suspenseful film. Great performances all around, especially with the late great Anton Yelchin. But Hereditary is, well, it is to me, it is a masterpiece. I'm going to be saying that a lot if this goes forward, but it is, and it's. I feel like it may be one of the standards when it comes to elevated horror and everything that we're trying to discuss with that.
Right.
But at its helm, it's just a very good, meticulous, fantastic, scary, and immensely driven and focused film that just also happens to be scary. So I feel like this this is elevated horror. This is intelligent horror, and I love this movie. So I'm picking that one.
Yeah, the proverbial poster child for elevated horror, I think, is this film, the one that you're talking about. Yeah, for sure.
All right, got to vote in for Hereditary. Brian, what do you think, man?
I love Green Room. Rest in peace, Anton Yelchin. Patrick Stewart, I thought he's not in the movie a lot, but I thought he was really effective as the main bad guy. And as much as I love that, Hereditary just blows it out the water as far as this category we're talking about. And there's a reason why people felt like spacing on her name right now. Somebody help me out. In the Hereditary, Toni Collette. There was a reason why people felt like she should have been nominated for something, because her performance was fantastic in that. So I have to go Hereditary.
All right, Gabriel, what do you think?
Hereditary is not my speed. I respect Ari Aster. He's clearly a master of his craft. He knows exactly how to get his vision, from his head onto the screen. But Green Room was intelligent and clever and provocative while still embracing the things about this genre, the horror thriller genre that I love. And, Hereditary just, I could really see people who liked this movie turning their nose at a lot of other movies that I like, because I feel like this movie, it didn't pander to it deliberately, but I did not appreciate what Hereditary did for the discourse, and it's just not a movie I have interest in revisiting compared to Green Room, which is it's a big favorite of mine. So Green Room.
All right.
Green
both
Room, okay.
both really, really good movies, by the way.
Garrett, what do you think?
Well, Hereditary is just one of those movies I saw without knowing a thing about it, and thank God I did, because I think the less you know about it going in, the better. That movie is just so impactful. Green Room, it was fine. It was visceral, but it wasn't really my speed. And Hereditary, it really, just all the psychological stuff going on in that movie. And you guys are right. Toni Collette deserves something for what she brought to that role. I'm going to go Hereditary.
All right, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, Jean-Luc Picard as a villain is awesome on paper. I just wish the execution was a little more my speed, or a little something more for me to chew on there.
Right.
I liked Green Room. I loved Hereditary. I mean, Hereditary is just the subtext, the subliminal messaging, the way that movie holds up on a rewatch after the plot arc of it and the pieces of it. There's so much more happening that you kind of put it together after the fact and then just go, okay, all that stuff. Ari Aster in general, I mean, I'm a fan of the guy. I love the idea that his two films, and then I assume Beau is Afraid will probably do something similar, but you get like so much of a straight movie, and then Aster, it's almost like he walks in and he just goes, "Are you paying attention yet?" Kind of thing. I love that. I love that interactive aspect to this movie. I Hereditary for me.
All right. What do you think, Matthew?
This is one of those, I think it's one of the harder ones to call in this bracket, but I'm going to go with Green Room because I think Hereditary has one advantage in that it's got a lot more time to work with than Green Room does, but I think Green Room is more effective because it makes the most of its, 90 plus minutes. I never felt like it was struggling to get to feature length. I thought when it had to get more intense, like when they're barricading the door and his arm gets injured, that was one of those things that I don't get squeamish nowadays, but I sort of took a step back. And as much as I have scars from season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and I don't want to support Patrick Stewart at the moment, I will still go with Green Room.
Yo, sidebar, season 3 has been pretty dope. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for it to finish so people can tell me if it's worth watching the whole thing.
Right.
Just saying.
All right. So, hey, Jack, has Worf finally shown up yet? I only saw the first episode.
That he has.
Okay. All right, Don, what's it going to be, man?
Yeah, if we consider Get Out like the poster child or like 1A of this subgenre, Hereditary is like 1B. Green Room for me was just a simple, straightforward thriller that I really cared for it. So,
Okay.
Hereditary by leaps and bounds.
Gotcha. All right. And so, Bede, your vote doesn't really count, but what is it anyway?
Well, it was going to be Hereditary anyway because
Okay.
it's basically the poster child of the elevated horror genre, and also like a lot of quote unquote elevated horror, it has the horror elements, but even if you took that out, it would still be a great film on its
Right.
own as a drama. And of course, Toni Collette should have got all the awards for her performance in this film. So that was the film I was going to vote for.
Very nice. Okay. Moving on. So now we've got It Follows versus another foreign film. So I'm sure Don's going to go for this one, High Tension. So, Don, which one do you go for?
You're wrong. I'm calling Bella High Tension. It is not elevated horror. I'm going It Follows.
Okay. It Follows.
I call the buzzer on High Tension. I think that's more of a slasher.
Okay.
It's very inventive. There's a lot of things that are going on, but I think it doesn't really have that rewatchability to it. I mean, once you figure out the twist, it's just a regular slasher film. And
Okay.
so if I have to do a tiebreaker, I guess everyone knows what I'm gonna vote for.
It's got high in the title, so that by definition makes it elevated.
There's a lot of
all right.
high tension in trying to define what this fucking elevator horror things means in this room here right now. So, there is that as well.
Brian, what is your pick?
Somebody brought up Mount Rushmore of elevated horror. I think It Follows could arguably go there, and High Tension is not elevated horror. It's got its own genre. What is it? A French extremist?
Okay.
Is that gonna be next year's tournament, Lance?
I
Hey,
think it's called vulgar.
You guys call it. It's always you.
Vulgar
listeners that
auteur.
pick, so.
Vulgar auteurism, I think, is
There you
there's
go.
a Wikipedia page dedicated to this. Vulgar auteur cinema, and High Tension is definitely on that.
We can always do like Tim Davis does
Writing
over at
that down?
Dummies of Horror and do porn parody horror movies now. Bede.
Yeah, I like High Tension, but I agree I wouldn't classify it as elevated horror. But although a part of me reckons in some level it probably thinks it is because of its twist ending, because but it was just a little too smart for its own good with that ending. But I'm definitely going with It Follows because, again, like Hereditary and Get Out, it definitely came out of that sort of, little period where it became also another poster child for the elevated horror genre, and it has all the hallmarks of what this subgenre is. So yeah, It Follows for me.
All right. What do you think, Gabe?
Yeah, I think whenever you look up elevated horror, It Follows is one of those movies that's always referenced. And while that doesn't give it the point for me automatically, I really respect the way it kind of revolutionized the concept of a stalking movie, even just the way that it was filmed. I think the constant POV, like she's always looking over her shoulder, and it's the stalker's always the same distance from the camera. That one small thing to me, like, redefined that sort of thing that we'd always been seeing in horror movies. So the way that director kind of came out with his own voice and reinvented a very popular idea in horror movies I really respect that. And High Tension, with that twist ending, is there something called elevated horror? Because I think that's probably something that it fits into better.
Depends on what kind of elevator you're talking about, man.
Oh man, yeah, that ending was kind of similar to that movie Shroom. Remember that one? All right, Jack.
Yeah, I'll go It Follows. I don't have a strong opinion about either one of these movies, but It Follows just feels more like the kind of movie we're talking about. High Tension, not so much. So.
Okay, Marcus.
Oh man, this is actually kind of hard for me because High Tension was, I believe, the very first foreign horror film that I ever watched. It was a very eye-opening and graphic experience, and that movie always have a special place in my heart. But if we're talking about, higher up horror, then yeah, definitely It Follows would fall into that category a little bit. Probably one of the greatest after-school public service announcements ever. And just a very interesting and just like detailed film. I mean, it was one of those movies where I was paying attention to everything at all times, and it was it was a very stressful experience watching that film because the subject matter hits very hard and it's very conventional, but also told in kind of a refreshing way. And I enjoyed it, and I still do. So yeah, It Follows.
Okay.
Yeah, makes great use of the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Garrett, your turn.
Easiest head-to-head matchup so far for me. It Follows has a great concept, but it got more ridiculous as it went, and that conclusion to It Follows, that final battle, quote unquote, is just ridiculous and stupid. High Tension just grew on me. It grew and grew. And say what you want about the ending, but it was a twist, and it it jolted me when I saw it in theaters initially, and the impact that had on me was a hell of a lot more than It Follows. So I'm going High Tension here.
All right. And what about you, Matthew?
I'm going with It Follows. I have a bias against High Tension from its inception because the twist was spoiled for me before I saw it.
Oh.
So I've always never really been able to judge that movie on its own merit.
All right. So I think it's safe to say It Follows is moving forward. Despite Garrett's solo vote.
It'll be a good matchup.
Now we're going to we're getting a little dark here now, folks. We've got Enemy versus Antichrist. Brian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Enemy. I'm not a fan of having to go watch a YouTube video to explain what I just watched. But I'm also not a fan of Antichrist. I'm not a fan of genital mutilation and babies falling out of windows. So I guess I'll give it to Enemy, I guess, reluctantly.
Enemy.
That should be on the poster.
Genital mutilation.
All right, Don and Ellie, what is it, man?
Well, since I never found in me, and I'm totally fine with genital mutilation. I've seen more of that than I care to admit, and it's not a turn off at all. I'm totally cool with watching, like American Guinea Pig Sacrifice or any of those kinds of stuff. I'll take Antichrist since that was the one I saw.
Okay, Matthew.
Well, I kind of wish Jake Gyllenhaal was an Antichrist for obvious reasons, if you know me. This is tough because Enemy, I put more in the thriller camp because a lot of that is the classic trope of what you don't see, but it's also inevitably undone by, as Brian said, the ending is so fucking preposterous that you have to watch these supplementary materials just to understand it. Whereas Antichrist is one of those things where it's Lars von Trier, his whole mantra, and I don't know if he's ever said this, is that people suck and the only thing that is going to matter is when you're dead. He's one of the most misanthropic filmmakers I think we ever have, but I appreciate his Take Me As I Am sort of approach. And Antichrist, as far as horror goes, there was some stuff in there that, genital mutilation notwithstanding, I thought was very disturbing. So I think I'm going to go with Antichrist. And I feel like I have some repenting to do because I went against a Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
Okay. Antichrist it is. Garrett?
Yeah, surprisingly, I'm going to agree with a lot of what my co-host just said. In fact, all of it. I'm going with Antichrist as well. I'm not a fan of Enemy. I'm not a big Villeneuve fan. I didn't really like that one. But Antichrist, say what you want about it. It leaves an impact on you. So, yeah, I'll go with that one.
It leaves something on you, that's for sure. Like all Lars von Trier movies. Okay, Marcus.
Yeah, I gotta go Antichrist too. I mean, it's Enemy is decent for what it is, but Antichrist is very graphic and gruesome but very told in a weirdly beautiful way, I guess, by the way it's shot and just the stuff you see on the screen. It's also very repulsive and kind of uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. But it just works so much better as an effective horror film than Enemy does. So yeah, I got to go with Antichrist.
Another vote for Antichrist. Jack, save us, man.
Yeah, I'm a Von Trier fan's the wrong word. I've liked a bunch of his movies, but I've really disliked a bunch of his movies too. And Antichrist is one of the ones that I really, really don't like. And Enemy happens to be a movie that I was very pleasantly surprised by. I actually love Enemy. I think that it's an awesome movie. I think it's very entertaining. And I think it's right on the line of whatever this elevated horror genre could be. I know it's psychological thriller more than anything, but I feel like that fits. So yeah, I go Enemy.
All right. Let's see. Gabe.
Yeah, fuck Lars von Trier.
Hell yeah.
Not a fan. I think he is a quarter as talented as he thinks he is. We talk about his nihilism and
Shots
I don't know.
fired, man.
That's I don't know. That just manifests to me as really ugly, mean-spirited, edgelordy visuals. I think he just wants to inflict harm on the audience. And his version of trolling is by claiming to sympathize with Adolf Hitler at the Cannes Film Festival. So I'm just not a fan of that guy. And Enemy wins by default.
Oh man, it's getting competitive. All right, another for Enemy. Wow, Bede, it kind of comes down to you, man.
Well, I don't consider Enemy a horror film at all. It's definitely more psychological. I do like the movie, but I remember more things from Antichrist than I do Enemy. I mean, when Enemy all it has going for it in terms of me remembering it is a giant spider, while
Right.
Antichrist has genital mutilation and among other things. I can definitely see which one's going to hit me and stick with me more. So I'm going with Antichrist.
Oh no, Pedro, guess what?
Oh shit.
Yep. Sorry.
No, that's
Oh no, we got Antichrist, huh?
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
We're
Yep.
spot
Oh,
on.
I was wrong. My math was, as usual, off. Antichrist moves.
All right.
I would have been
Pedro,
surprised if that had
you got
lost,
spared,
honestly.
Pedro. You got spared. All right. Next, and this is the last one on this fourth of the contest. We've got two very different movies. Under the Skin versus the very, very, very aged and perhaps classic Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Where do we begin? Bede, do you want to start us off?
We might hit the buzzer on the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but I don't know. I don't consider that an elevator horror. There's a lot.
Yep.
There's been essays written about that film that I don't know if it qualifies to be elevator horror. But let's go on. Let's hear the people
well,
out.
if you can write an essay on it.
Yeah. Well, I have
For
to.
this movie.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Pedro. I don't consider Dr. Caligari an elevated horror film, even though it is a film that did change the landscape of horror, because it is more of a German expressionism film than anything else. But if I had to compare this and Under the Skin in terms of which one I liked more, I will definitely say Under the Skin, because, no pun intended, this film got under my skin more than Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Okay.
I mean, that beach scene has been haunting me ever since I saw this film in the cinema. And again, you could make the argument whether Under the Skin is for horror or not, but I think, again, like a lot of quote unquote elevated horror, it definitely is a horror film, but it has other elements added to it to make it more than just a horror film. So I'm definitely going with Under the Skin on this one.
Nice. Okay. Gabe.
Yeah, I feel bad for Under the Skin. It's going against one of the most important movies ever made. It was a really unnerving film, Under the Skin, with a really, I think, impressive performance from Scarlett Johansson. I don't know if she's gone on to play villainous characters again, but I think she really got to me using her, her, let's say, seductress abilities, and then turning that around into being a really inhuman presence on screen. There's a lot that Under the Skin has going for it, but I mean, like I said, if you take Psycho out, you change film history, and if you take the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari out, I just don't think we'd even be sitting down talking about horror movies. It's like taking out the Beatles, or maybe even going farther back, taking out Beethoven. Now, I can't say which one I enjoy more, because I study Caligari more than I watch it, but I think it's more valuable, so I have to go with that.
Okay, one for the cabinet. Jack.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think I just got to go with Under the Skin. It's just not Caligari's. It's just not even a. It's just not this genre. I think Under the Skin is and Caligari isn't. So Under the Skin.
Marcus, what do you think?
Yeah, Under the Skin too. It's a very surreal film. I loved it. It had all the elements there, had all the forebodement, and hopefully that's the right word. But to it, it was I still remember it. Caligari, I don't really. I mean, I've seen it before, but it didn't stick at all. It's I mean, I understand the relevance of it and when it comes to the history of the whole genre, but I'm going Under the Skin.
Under the Skin it is. Garrett.
Yeah, Caligari. Jack said this isn't really part of this genre, and I completely agree with him. Under the Skin, you tell any mother, and Bede brought it up, the beach scene. You tell any mother that beach scene is in a horror scene, and they will punch you in the face. Under the Skin, not to mention, I think and this has nothing to do with the real horror part of this, but I think it has one of the most daring performances I've ever seen out of an A-list actress, out of Scarlett Johansson. I will go Under the Skin as well.
Nice. Matthew.
I choose Under the Skin because it fits the definition more so. But I must say, for my own personal opinion, as a gay man, I didn't find Under the Skin all that scary. I'm not going to lie.
And you're not Scottish either, so there's that.
No, I just have Scotch in my bar behind
You're not
me.
driving around the Scottish Highlands, so.
Scarlett
Under the Skin is a nightmare that a straight Scottish man would have. Absolutely.
Right. All right, Don, what's your vote, man?
Yeah, we're hitting the buzzer on Caligari. It's Skin by default here. And not that it matters, but Caligari is silent anyway, so that fucks off.
Okay. Brian.
I put Under the Skin in the same category as Annihilation. I think it fits better in this category, and I think it's one of Scarlett Johansson's one of her better performances, and she didn't have I don't believe she had a whole lot of dialogue in there, so Under the Skin.
Just lots and lots of black goo, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that says anything about a woman's best performance being when they're silent.
Lance, you fucked up again. All right.
We ready?
Under the Skin wins that one pretty easily.
Ready to spin the
Pedro,
beer?
yeah, I'll take it. Pedro, you want to do side 2 for us?
Okay, so side 2 starts off with Mandy and the Night House, and we'll start with Don. We'll start with you.
Oh God, this is probably the toughest one for me. I'm not a fan of